Okay, hi guys, we're here at MLG Anaheim Day 1 with Game Director StarCraft 2 Heart of the Swarm, Dustin Browder. How are you doing this weekend?
Very good. This is a very exciting place to be this weekend.
Yeah, it is, and we just had a conference with you where we saw a lot of new units and a lot of new changes. And before we kind of go into that stuff, I want to roll back a little bit and start talking about the stuff we've been experiencing right now from the community side.
Sure.
So let's talk about those balance changes that you guys made recently. A lot of pro players have been, humming and hawing about Zerg, and with those changes you guys rolled out for the Queen, the range on Queen specifically, how do you guys feel that went over? Now that it's been live for a while, what did you think of the feedback, statistically, and from the pros, and where do you see it going in the future?
Statistically, we're still looking really good on that, but we'll wait and see. Anytime we make any kind of change like this, there's usually a little bump, right, for a lot of our players that requires them to adjust to the changes in the game, and we're not sure 100% yet how that's going to go. I know it's been a little while, but it hasn't been long enough, I think, at this point. So we're going to wait and see how things settle down at this point. We're certainly seeing Terrans win a little bit less in the tournaments that we're watching, which is exciting for us to see. But we don't know. You don't know what's going to happen in the near future. So we're still watching that one very, very closely.
And what are your thoughts on the metagame overall? Players at the pro level have complained a little bit about things like late game ZVP, where you have this dynamic where if you can neural parasite a mothership, you can just change the game.
Sure.
And it's not something where a lot of StarCraft is based on the idea that you can kind of come back from situations.
Sure.
But this is one of those situations where you can just lose your entire army,
Sure.
or destroy his entire army
Sure.
in a couple actions. So
Sure.
what are your thoughts on that?
It's funny. I have
dynamic?
not heard that about a neural parasiting a mothership. I have not seen enough motherships in play to think that was a serious concern, in the GSL, that we were going to suddenly see neural parasited motherships. There has always been a concern with neural parasite that would push units out of the game. That we would, because of that because of that ability to see that kind of switch, that motherships would simply never be built in that matchup. So I'm a little surprised to hear that that's the biggest concern we have in the metagame right now. I know we've got a lot of concerns. I've heard, concerns about Zerg, against Protoss being able to do sort of mass roach strategy. Stefano did a build like this. We've heard concerns about TVZ matchup with the Queen change, but I hadn't heard that neuroparasite mothership was the biggest problem we were dealing with at this point.
Well, it's not the biggest problem, but it is a problem with, you can debate whether it's a problem or not, where it's just it's not a coin flippy situation, but it is a situation where the game can just dramatically change either way.
And we certainly see that. I would argue we see that throughout the game. Certainly we see that with EMP and High Templar, right? Where there's really a couple of moments and a couple of clicks that can make a very significant deciding factor to this outcome. Would we want to smooth those out? Some. It's a line, right? Have we gone too far? Have we not gone, or where are we at on it? I certainly feel like if I were to pick a moment that I'd be more upset about, it would certainly be the High Templar Ghost moment, where I feel like it's very, very close. And there is some good dancing that our players have learned to do with that, so it's not quite so crucial. Splitting up their ghosts or moving their High Templars apart and that kind of stuff, but it still hangs on just a couple of clicks in some cases. But it is part of the game at this point, right? That's not something that we can easily just wipe out that whole concept. We could certainly look into fixing Infestor Mothership, because I have not heard that feedback. That's not one that, from this conversation, I would take all that seriously. I haven't seen enough motherships for that to be viable, but there are places like what you're saying. That's a very viable question. And I think at this point, if some of that is real, it's a question of a line for us, and we do allow some of that, especially when it gets towards the end game. It can now get really crucial, right, at those moments, and we do like that tension. We think it is fun to watch. It's not always as fun to play, but it is fun to watch those really tense moments, and that's certainly true of almost all sports, where it comes down to a couple of inches here will determine the course of the whole game, right? And we feel like that is a valid part of an esport, but it is a line. I don't know if we've crossed it yet or not.
And are you happy with the way balance is overall right now? Is there anything you're looking at particularly?
We're always looking at everything that's going on all the time. Every time we hear a complaint, we're always checking stuff out. Like I say, so we are watching right now Zerg versus Protoss very carefully. We are continuing to watch this change to the Queen's range to see how that's affecting TVZ specifically. We made that change primarily because we felt like the Zerg were too easily contained by just a handful of Hellions. We wanted them to be able to protect their tumors, more easily protect their bases. A lot of Terran players were just trading Hellions for drones at some point in the game, and there was not a lot the Zerg could seem to be able to do about it. We kind of felt that was legitimate, that there really wasn't much they could do about it. They weren't going to learn something at some point down the road here. This was real, and so we felt like we had to try to do something. It will upend that matchup a little bit. It means the Terran player is going to work a little harder. In terms of the numbers, we're still seeing really good numbers, but that can change at a drop of a hat. We looked at the numbers this morning, coming down here knowing I get these kinds of questions, obviously. We are within 1% win-loss across the world, everywhere. Masters, Grandmasters, everywhere else, except for North America, Zerg versus Protoss, where the Zerg have an advantage right now.
Okay.
And so I want to see if that spreads. Does that go to Korea and Europe? Does it stay in North America? Does it get destroyed in North America? We go back to stability there? Don't know. So we're watching that very closely as well.
I'm going to switch topics a little bit, and it's to an issue that's affecting a lot of players and a lot of pros right now, and it's kind of a big conversation, and it's about the state of BattleNet and hacking, and I know you're not obviously BattleNet security.
Sure.
But with the World Championship this weekend, we have a 98% chance that there's two guys who we kind of confirmed were hacking that qualified, and of course that didn't get picked up by Warden, and so a lot of pros are saying, this is something I deal with on a day-to-day basis, whether it's that camera locking thing or the Blink Stalker hack. Is there anything on the Blizzard end that they're working on to kind of alleviate this?
We're always chasing these guys, right? Every time that they, are trying to break into it, we're updating Warden. We're doing everything we can to make sure we stomp out these hacks, and it all just depends. We have different points in time where sometimes we're ahead of them and sometimes they're ahead of us. But it's a constant battle being waged behind the scenes, a secret war between Blizzard and the hackers to try to make this stuff go away. But we're very serious about it. We're very committed to it. We know it. We know it's terrible. Like, we know when those things happen. I've been hacked. I've been in games where I have a guy who is looking at my base, and he hasn't scouted me yet in the first 5 minutes. Like, oh, you're map hacking, dude. And so it's always frustrating when those occur. But we're doing everything we can to get on top of these. But I don't know specifics about what hacks are currently in. I don't even know if I would tell you if I knew. Like, I don't want these guys to know, right? So we'll do everything we can to keep fighting these. But I hear the complaints. We agree with the complaints. The complaints are real, right? And we'd like to do better with this.
Sure. And do you think with the World Championship, because it's been opened up pretty much to everybody, and you're dealing with a lot of online qualifiers where,
it's a risk.
It's
a risk, and it's a concern, and it's something that the guys who are running the tournament's going to have to very aggressively deal with and make sure that they find players who won legitimately. And that's going to be an absolute concern for us.
So let's switch to a nicer subject, which is Heart of the Swarm.
Cool.
So you talked a little bit about some of these new units. Can you go over a little bit more about breaking up the ball, because that's a big dynamic in StarCraft 2 right now that players complain about is Protoss Death Ball, Zerg Death Ball.
There's sort of two big sort of philosophical complaints that we heard, and there was many more, of course. So I don't want to discount anything, but there's two big philosophical complaints that we heard that we totally agreed with. One was the Death Balls could get a little complicated, a little too big. Obviously, at some point there's going to be a big mass of units, right? But how weird and diverse it is and how much the composition matters was a legitimate complaint. And the second complaint was there was not as many the siege tank is totally a board control unit, right? They can sort of force you to think, okay, I can't just push into that. It doesn't matter how much I have. I can't push into that. How do I go around? How do I maneuver against that? And that was really the one race that had that ability, right? So we're trying to add more of that kind of stuff. We're trying to give, the Protoss, the Zerg, the ability to create areas of control with the Swarm host. We're trying to create things like the Widow Mine and the Oracle that pull sort of resources away from the main army and distribute those resources elsewhere on the map, so there's more opportunity for combat all over the map and more small engagements that are occurring. I think we've done a pretty good job with that, with things like drops, but still we want to try to do better. So it's a goal. How much we succeed with that is impossible to say. Obviously players, while they say they don't want that, it's the easiest way to play is with the Death Ball, right? That would be the way, players will always try to get back to that if they can, right? How can I get everything into one spot so I can just kill you? Like, that would be awesome, right? And so we're trying to find ways to make that a little less attractive. And certainly things like, Abduct on the Viper and Blinding Cloud on the Viper, I can provide additional ways to sort of mess with the other guy's Death Ball and make it a little less attractive to just clump up and try to spread out a little bit more, make himself a little bit more effective. But we'll see. Those are sort of two main goals. Reasons to go around and reasons to spread out would be things we'd like to try to achieve. At the end of the day, if we just end up creating a bunch of cool new strategies, that would be awesome. But these are sort of the high-level philosophies we'd also like to address.
Sure. So with that idea of breaking apart that Death Ball, one of the units you'd introduced previously was the Shredder, which is no longer in the game. And for those who don't know, of course, it was a unit that you could drop, and it had like an AOE attack that would damage units. What was it about that unit that you guys found just wasn't going to?
There was a couple of things that were flawed about the Shredder. It was very difficult to find a balance point for that unit that was really effective. It was either way too strong or way too weak, and we could never find that sweet spot for it. That was one problem with it. The second problem with that unit was it was very confusing. It would turn off if friendly forces got into play, but if enemy forces were nearby, only enemy forces would take damage. So players, even very high-level players, Grandmaster level players, kept accidentally turning off their own shredders by actually moving one thing just a pixel too close. It was very fiddly, to use. The last bit that was very destructive is that probably gold and below, it was just used as a raider to wipe out the other guy's worker line, and it was annihilation. And we couldn't reasonably feel like we could do something like say, well, it doesn't affect hover units, but it affects air. Right. But wait, so that means Archons can kill it? It was very awkward, all the things that were we tried things like, we'll just make it doesn't affect workers, but it hurts everything else. Like, what is this unit now? It was getting very complicated and very strange. We were seeing players literally like rush in and kill it with just SCVs because the worker was immune. But then if you didn't have that, you were raiding like crazy. So it had complexity problems at the end of the day. And we feel like the Widow Mine removes a lot of those complexity problems, does a lot of the same things, but is a much cleaner, much clearer unit, has more strategy.
One of the points you made in the presentation was that you had kind of had a change in philosophy based on community feedback as far as what units you would... and the unit you focus in on that you're still debating is the carrier. Sure. What is it about the carrier that's making you question whether it should be in or not?
Well, we have the Tempest, and the carrier rarely gets used. And the biggest reason I've heard why the carrier has to stay is because it's cool. Right. Well, because it's a carrier. You can't take out the carrier because it's the carrier. Right. It's like, I don't know if that's enough, right? Like everything else we found an actual mechanical use for, right? They're like, oh, no, wait, they do use the mothership and they use it in this way and it's really cool, right? Or, no, you know what, actually, overseers do find a use in this way if we do this to the balance, right? We found ways to make these other units work. And the carrier I feel like I have a legitimate replacement for that's still a big gold ship, still looks cool, and does more different, cooler stuff, hopefully. Sure. So in that scenario, we're just not sure that it's necessary to do it. But I'd be open to feedback as to why the carrier needs to stay as opposed to having a Tempest replace it, other than, please don't, I like it. Sure. Even that could be enough. You know what I mean? I don't know. We're still arguing about it. I'm sort of on the fence to saying, yeah, you know what? It's dumb. It doesn't have any use. It will never have any use. But we'll just leave it in. And who cares, right? And I guess it's an option to take, and then we'll debate about it and say, come on, dude, don't wuss out. Make the game tight, make it clean, make it clear. Focus on making a quality experience, and don't just give in because it's cool. Give in because there's a really mechanical reason to be there. And those are sort of the two sides of it, right? Should we just let it be there because it's cool, or should we say, no, we have something cooler and it doesn't need to be there. It's time for it to come out.
Last question.
Sure.
You guys had released a blog pretty recently detailing some of these new features that you have on a wish list for Heart of Swarm, specifically multiplayer replays and a reconnect feature. And you guys didn't show anything with that today. Can you tell us what the status is of those and where they are in development?
Yeah, it's still totally in progress. We're still working on those. We just spent a ton of time doing this Arcade 1.5 patch. I don't know if you've seen this yet, but it's up on beta right now. And it was a ton of work for us to get that out. We put that out free to the community for everybody to have. And we feel like that is finally getting us to a slightly better place, at least for Arcade, but we put a lot of work into that. And now we're able to move on to these other features we've been dying to do for years. And so we'll hopefully have something to roll out to you guys really soon.
Great. Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.